Today we're going to be reading about General Irvin McDowell. He is the only character in Bull Run that is real. The picture of him is on the right. It says Major General Irvin McDowell, commander of the Union forces at the First Battle of Manassas, Bull Run in 1861. Later, he commanded all army posts along the Pacific coast. The directions are asking you to highlight as you read. You're looking for what he says and thinks and does and feels so that you can determine his character, what type of man he is. At the bottom, you'll write your notes about his character traits. Chapter 18. You notice that some things are underlined. Those are things that are important to make note of. Highlighted are things that he says or does or feels. I felt myself to be a horse who ordered to gallop while still hitched to a post. As commander of the Army of the Potomac, I was expected to crush the Confederacy Army and, if need be, take Richmond its capital. The public, the press, the politicians, the president all demanded it. And since many of my soldiers were 90-day men whose enlistment would expire in July, I was expected to accomplish this with all speed. Despite the fact that my troops were as green as June apples, spoke a babel of tongues, and were led by officers who knew nothing of battle. Despite lacking sufficient weapons, ammunition, mules, food, and equipment of every sort, despite the fact that my success depended on keeping the Confederate Army in the West from leaving Harper's Ferry and joining Bergen, a duty given to General Patterson, who was too old and too timid for this or any task. Despite my not having a single reliable map of Virginia, which I was to invade, and despite the most wearisome problem of all, one I dared not complain of in public, I, who just a few weeks before been made a brigadier general in command of an army of 30,000, had seldom led more than 100 men. In spite of all this, I drew up a plan of attack. It was approved by the president. We'd begin our march south in the second week of July. I dreaded the coming of that day. In that paragraph, you can feel the weight of the expectations put upon him. It sounds like an impossible task. Chapter 26. I spent a full day studying the terrain, revised my plan, and was ready to attack. Then I found that the army was out of food. The commissary wagons hadn't arrived. I squandered another day waiting for them, praying that Patterson had the rebels in the west penned up beyond the Shenandoah. I made out the sound of a train whistle far off, but thought little of it at the time. All was finally in order. We would strike Bergen on Sunday morning. On Saturday afternoon, I was told that the 8th New York Militia term of service would end at midnight, and that they planned to march north and not south. I addressed them, as did the Secretary of War. On the morrow, we told them, they'd at last have the chance to fire their rifles at secession and give the bayonets to treason. Without them, the Union might well be lost. The spirit of George Washington hovered above them, awaiting their decision. We spoke the same words to the 4th Pennsylvania and begged them to serve a single week more. In both cases, the men listened patiently, then continued making ready to leave. So they can't stop the war because none of the food has arrived. So they put off a day, and now they're losing troops because their contract is up. The light faded, the moon came up. I rode back toward my lodging through the encampments. Some were bedlams of noise and gaming and drunkenness. Others were quiet. One company of Scotsmen were singing the Star-Spangled Banner most beautifully. I moved on. In the distance, a band was playing a soothing serenade from Don Pasquale. I couldn't help but notice the number of men clustered around the chaplain's tent. Some were shedding their sins, some dictating letters to scribbling chaplains. I passed quite close to one and smiled to catch the words, "No qualm, dearest Gwen, at dying for our precious Union." The chaplain is the priest, so it's like they're going to talk to someone religious. The final chapter, the two soldiers show you what flanking is. Instead of attacking straight on, you put your troops on both sides and you kind of squeeze until everyone in the middle is dead. My flanking attack had succeeded superbly, despite the delay, despite the fact that the men were no more than summer soldiers, despite the losses they absorbed. We'd driven the enemy backward all day. I paused for a time to reform my line. I was then ready to deliver the death blow, ending the battle of the Confederacy both. Beauregard, though, had made use of the lull and had shifted many more men west. I ordered my artillery forward to pound his line at the close range, but the infantry who were to support them lost their way and were shattered by cavalry. Our gunners through the era were then slaughtered by the rebels, who turned our canyons about upon us. We stormed the hill and reclaimed them more than once, but each time were forced to retreat. My men were collapsing from exhaustion and thirst. Some died of sunstroke in the fearsome heat. Fresh Southern troops, brought east by train, then reached the field. To great cheers from the comrades, I cursed old General Patterson anew. They fell upon us with their blood-curdling yell. The right end of my line began to buckle. Then I watched it give way like a dam. So when the dam falls, all the water comes rushing, and all of his men are dead. Even though he had a great strategy with the flanking, because they had to wait a day for food, the other side, Beauregard, got more men there, and then another train arrived. So unfortunately, General Irvin did not win. So at the bottom here, you're going to write his role, what's his job. Write down some of the things that he does and he says or he's thinking. And then you're going to describe him. There is a list of traits in your binder. The mood is how you're feeling as you read this. We don't really feel triumphant because all our men are dying and we've lost the battle.